The soft glow of an autumn afternoon blanketed the quiet streets of the small town. Nestled on a corner was the Sunset Theater, a charming little cinema known for its intimate atmosphere and well-curated films. On this day, the theater was hosting a much-anticipated historical war drama, and the crowd inside buzzed with excitement. Among the attendees was Henry Parker, a man whose life had been shaped by the very history depicted in the film. At 68, Henry was a retired Major General of the U.S. Army. He had dedicated more than 4 decades to serving his country, earning a reputation for his discipline, wisdom, and calm leadership. Retirement hadn't slowed him down. With his neatly combed silver hair, sharp eyes, and steady posture, he still carried himself like a soldier. Dressed in a crisp white shirt and polished black shoes, Henry entered the theater, his presence quiet yet commanding. The theater was lively. Families with children, couples on dates, and solitary moviegoers filled the rows, chatting in hushed tones. The smell of popcorn hung in the air, mingling with the soft rustle of candy wrappers. Henry chose a seat in the middle row, where he could enjoy the full grandeur of the screen, and settled in, his eyes scanning the room. This, he thought, was a far cry from the chaos of the battlefield, a peaceful reminder of why he had fought so hard for the freedoms people often took for granted. As the lights dimmed and the previews began, Henry let himself relax. But his peace was short-lived. From the row behind him came a loud, intrusive voice. "Yeah, I told him I'm not handling that until next week." Henry turned slightly, his sharp gaze falling on a young man in a wrinkled police uniform. The name tag read Grant. The man, likely in his late 20s, was slouched in his seat, phone pressed to his ear, and chewing gum loudly. His uniform shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, and his casual demeanor suggested he didn't take his job, or anything seriously. Henry wasn't the only one to notice. A few people in the audience exchanged uneasy glances, their whispers blending with the movie's opening music. Someone up front softly said, "Shh," but the young officer ignored it entirely, continuing his animated conversation. Henry focused on the film, trying to tune out the disturbance. The screen depicted soldiers marching into battle, a scene that stirred deep memories for him. But the young man's loud laughter broke the immersion. Henry turned again, his voice calm but firm. "Excuse me, young man," he said. "Would you mind keeping your voice down? We're all here to enjoy the film." Grant looked at Henry with a smirk, his gums snapping audibly. "What's it to you, old man?" he said dismissively, turning back to his phone. With deliberate defiance, he continued his conversation, even louder than before. Henry's expression didn't change, but a flicker of irritation crossed his eyes. Years of military training had taught him patience and composure, even in the face of disrespect. He turned back to the screen, choosing to let the matter rest for now. Around him, the atmosphere in the theater shifted. Murmurs of discontent rippled through the audience. An elderly woman a few rows ahead whispered, "How rude. Can't he see he's disturbing everyone?" Though the movie played on, many were distracted by the officer's behavior. For Henry, the situation went beyond a simple nuisance. It was a reflection of something larger, the erosion of discipline, respect, and accountability, qualities he had spent his life upholding. Henry leaned back in his seat, his gaze steady. He had no intention of letting this go unresolved, but he knew better than to escalate the situation prematurely. For now he waited, his patience like the calm before a storm. The movie played on, its powerful imagery pulling most of the audience into a tale of courage and sacrifice. But for Henry Parker, the story unfolding on the screen was overshadowed by the commotion behind him. The young officer, Alex Grant, showed no signs of stopping his disruptive behavior. His voice rose and fell, punctuated by bursts of loud laughter, each sound grating against the theater's collective patience. "Unbelievable," muttered a man sitting nearby. Others exchanged exasperated looks, and a couple sitting a few rows away shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The tension in the room was palpable. Henry, still seated calmly, decided to give Alex one more chance. Turning in his seat, he spoke again, his voice measured and steady. "Young man," Henry said, "I'm asking you politely. Please lower your voice. Everyone here paid to watch this movie, not listen to your conversation." This time, Alex didn't just smirk. He laughed outright, leaning back in his seat. "And who do you think you are?" he said loudly, drawing more attention from the crowd. "You think you can tell me what to do? Sit down and mind your business." The audacity of the response left a ripple of murmurs across the theater. Henry's jaw tightened ever so slightly, but he didn't lose his composure. Instead, he sat back in his seat, his sharp mind already analyzing the situation. Alex, emboldened by what he saw as Henry's retreat, leaned forward, resting his arms on the back of Henry's seat. "Let me guess," Alex said, his voice dripping with mockery. "You're one of those retired old-timers who thinks the world owes them something. Guess what? It doesn't." A few gasps were heard from the surrounding audience. An elderly woman nearby turned and said, "You're the one being disrespectful. Can't you see you're disturbing everyone here?" But Alex shrugged her off with a dismissive wave. "I'm disturbing everyone?" he said, his tone exaggerated. "Oh, I'm so sorry." His words oozed sarcasm, and his behavior only seemed to grow louder, more obnoxious. Henry remained calm, though the storm of tension around him continued to build. He had seen far worse than this. A young man drunk on ego was nothing compared to the challenges he had faced on the battlefield. However, his patience wasn't limitless. Henry turned once more, this time fixing Alex with a look that froze the young man mid-smirk. "Let me be clear," Henry said quietly, his voice low but commanding. "You're not just disrespecting me, you're disrespecting everyone in this room. If you can't behave like a professional, then you should leave." For a moment, Alex seemed to hesitate. The intensity of Henry's gaze was unlike anything he had encountered before. It wasn't anger or aggression. It was something far more unsettling: authority. But Alex, unwilling to back down, scoffed and leaned back in his chair. "Authority," he muttered under his breath. "You're not my superior. You're just some old guy trying to relive your glory days." The room had grown eerily quiet, all eyes now fixed on the escalating exchange. Some audience members had pulled out their phones, recording the interaction in case things got worse. "You're embarrassing yourself," a man a few rows away called out to Alex. But Alex ignored him. Fueled by pride and the attention of the crowd, he leaned forward again, now visibly irritated. "What are you gonna do, old man? Call the manager?" Henry didn't flinch. "No," he replied simply, "but I can call someone else." Alex blinked, momentarily confused. "What's that supposed to mean?" he asked. Henry didn't answer. Instead, he pulled his phone from his pocket and began scrolling through his contacts. Alex's confidence faltered as the calm, calculated movement made him realize that Henry wasn't bluffing. The murmurs in the theater grew louder, with more and more people pulling out their phones, documenting Alex's behavior. "You can't be serious," Alex said, his voice slightly quieter now. "What are you doing?" Henry didn't look up. "Something you should have done a long time ago," he said, dialing a number. The tension in the room reached a breaking point as Henry pressed the phone to his ear. Alex's bravado began to crumble under the weight of the silent stare surrounding him. But it wasn't until Henry spoke into the phone that the first hint of fear flickered in Alex's eyes. "This is Henry Parker," Henry said calmly. "I'm at the Sunset Theater. There's a disturbance here, and I need it addressed immediately." Alex's confidence wavered further. "What, you calling the cops on me?" he sneered, trying to regain his footing. "Good luck with that." Henry locked eyes with him, his tone unwavering. "Not just any cop," he said. "I'm calling your boss." For a moment, Alex Grant froze, the weight of Henry's words hanging heavy in the tense silence. His confidence wavered as the murmurs from the audience grew louder, their disapproval unmistakable. Phones were out, their cameras recording every second. Alex glanced around the room, noticing the judgment in every pair of eyes. It was clear he was no longer in control of the situation. "What? You think you're some big shot?" Alex scoffed, though his voice lacked the arrogance it had carried earlier. "Calling my boss isn't going to scare me. I haven't done anything wrong." Henry placed the phone in his lap, locking eyes with Alex. His gaze was calm but carried a gravity that only decades of leadership could convey. "You've already made your mistakes, son," Henry said quietly, "and instead of fixing them, you're digging yourself deeper." The crowd seemed to collectively hold its breath as the tension mounted. Alex's pride, bruised and cornered, began to lash out. "You don't get to lecture me," he snapped, standing abruptly. His chair screeched against the floor, and the sudden movement caused some nearby patrons to flinch. "Sit down," someone hissed from the back of the room, but Alex ignored them. He jabbed a finger in Henry's direction, his voice rising. "You don't know anything about me. You don't know what I deal with every day. Don't act like you're better than me just because you're old and—" "Enough!" Henry's voice cut through Alex's rant like a blade, firm and commanding. It wasn't loud, but it carried the unmistakable authority of a man who had led troops through life-and-death situations. Alex hesitated, his mouth opening and closing like he wanted to retort, but couldn't find the words. The theater was deathly silent now, save for the soft hum of the film playing on the screen. The other patrons watched, their eyes bouncing between Alex and Henry as if anticipating what might happen next. Then something snapped. Maybe it was the weight of the crowd's judgment, or perhaps the realization that he was losing control of the situation. Whatever the reason, Alex's frustration erupted in the worst way possible. "You think you're so smart," he growled. His hand moved to his hip, and in one fluid motion, he pulled his service weapon from its holster. The reaction was immediate. Gasps and screams echoed through the theater as people ducked in their seats or scrambled to the aisles, desperate to get away. Chaos erupted as some patrons fled toward the exits, while others fumbled to call 911. But Henry didn't move. He sat perfectly still, his eyes locked on Alex, his expression unreadable. The sight of the gun didn't seem to faze him in the slightest. If anything, he looked as calm as ever. "Put the gun down," Henry said, his voice steady and unshaken. Alex's hand trembled slightly, though he tried to mask it by tightening his grip. "Don't tell me what to do," he barked, though there was a crack in his voice now, a sliver of doubt creeping in. Henry slowly stood, his movements deliberate and unthreatening. At his full height, he towered over Alex, his presence suddenly filling the room. "You're making a mistake," Henry said, "and this one will cost you everything." The weight of those words seemed to hang in the air, and for a brief moment, Alex faltered. His hand wavered, the barrel of the gun dipping slightly, but his ego fought back, refusing to let him yield. "You don't scare me," he said, though the words rang hollow. Henry didn't take his eyes off Alex. He didn't flinch or raise his voice. Instead, he leaned on the years of discipline and restraint that had been ingrained in him through decades of service. "This isn't about fear," Henry said. "It's about doing what's right. You're better than this." The words struck a chord, but before Alex could respond, a flash of red and blue lights spilled through the theater's glass doors. Sirens blared outside, their wails cutting through the muffled chaos inside. A commanding voice shouted, "Police! Everyone remain where you are!" The room collectively exhaled as the doors swung open, and a tall, broad-shouldered man in a sharp uniform stepped in. His face was stern, his eyes scanning the room before landing on Alex and the weapon in his hand. "Alex Grant," the man barked. "Put the gun down, now!" It was Samuel Hayes, the city's police chief. Alex froze, his face draining of color as realization dawned. The gun slipped from his fingers, clattering loudly onto the floor. The room fell into an eerie silence, the kind that comes after a storm has passed, but before its aftermath can fully be processed. The flashing lights outside the theater door continued to cast an unnatural glow inside, turning the otherwise peaceful cinema into something resembling a battlefield. People remained frozen in place, still unsure of what had just happened. Alex Grant's knees buckled slightly as he lowered his head, his face pale, eyes wide in disbelief. His hand hovered near the fallen gun, but it was as though his body was no longer under his control. The powerful presence of Samuel Hayes, the police chief, seemed to weigh down on him like an avalanche, leaving no room for resistance. "Chief Hayes," Alex's voice came out weak, almost pleading. I didn't mean for this to happen. But Samuel Hayes didn't wait for an explanation. His voice was firm, cutting through the tension in the room with the precision of a blade. "Shut it down, Alex. You've gone too far. You've made a mess of this, and now you're going to answer for it." Without another word, Hayes stepped forward and grabbed the gun from the floor, securing it in his holster before turning to Henry Parker, who stood calmly across the room, his face still a picture of quiet authority. "You okay?" Hayes asked, his voice softer now, but still carrying a hint of tension. Henry nodded. His expression hadn't changed much since the confrontation began, but his calm demeanor seemed to offer a steadying influence to the crowd. "I'm fine," he said simply, his voice steady. "It's not about me, though. It's about how we treat each other. That's what I wanted him to understand." Hayes turned his attention back to Alex, who was still standing, seemingly rooted to the spot. The younger officer's hands were shaking now, his entire body trembling under the weight of his actions. The room's occupants, who had been frozen in place just moments earlier, now began to shift restlessly, the tension dissipating in a slow trickle. Some still looked toward Henry with respect, others at Alex with disbelief and disapproval. "Alex," Hayes said, his voice no longer as commanding, but tinged with disappointment. "You don't get to pull a gun on someone in a movie theater. You're a police officer, not a thug. Your job is to protect, not provoke." Alex looked up, his eyes full of panic. I wasn't trying to hurt anyone. He trailed off, unable to form a coherent thought. Hayes' expression hardened. "You don't try to pull a gun, Alex. It's not something that just happens. You made a choice." The weight of those words seemed to hit Alex like a punch in the gut. His eyes flickered between Henry and the crowd, now fully aware of the gravity of his actions. His hands were no longer shaking with defiance. They were trembling with regret. "I was just frustrated," he muttered, his voice barely audible. "I didn't know who he was. I thought I could—" Henry cut him off. "It doesn't matter who I am. What matters is how you treat people. You can't use your position to intimidate others, especially not for something as trivial as a conversation in a theater." The police chief stepped closer, his voice lowering as he addressed his subordinate. "You're suspended, Alex, effective immediately. We'll have an internal investigation into this. You'll need to answer for your behavior, and I'm afraid this isn't going to end well for you." Alex's face dropped, his features contorting with a mix of disbelief and dread. The finality in Hayes' words left no room for argument. The young officer had gone too far, and now he would have to face the consequences. A few moments of silence passed before the chief spoke again, his voice heavy with disappointment. "Hand me your badge, Alex." With great reluctance, Alex slowly reached for his badge, the weight of his actions pressing down on him more than any physical object could. He handed it over, his fingers trembling. Hayes took it, his eyes narrowing as he examined the young man standing before him. "This is a breach of trust, Alex," Hayes continued. "You don't just lose your job, you lose respect, and that's the hardest thing to get back." The room was still, the weight of the situation hanging in the air. The audience, who had been watching the exchange with bated breath, finally began to stir, some whispering to each other, others looking at Henry with a new sense of admiration. But Henry didn't seek any attention. He simply turned and walked toward the exit, his purpose clear in his stride. The crowd parted as he moved, but no one spoke to him directly. They all seemed to understand that this was not about him. It was about something much more important. As Henry reached the door, he paused and glanced over his shoulder at the remaining crowd. "This is the kind of thing that shouldn't happen," he said quietly, "but I hope this serves as a reminder to all of you. Respect is earned, not demanded. It doesn't matter what your job is, how old you are, or where you come from. We all deserve the same decency." With that, Henry stepped out of the theater, leaving behind an atmosphere thick with reflection. The hum of the movie continued in the background, but it no longer held anyone's attention. What had started as a simple night at the movies had become a profound lesson in respect and accountability. After the shocking incident at the Sunset Theater, the story quickly spread. Footage of the confrontation, recorded by a bystander, went viral on social media, gaining millions of views in a matter of hours. The public's reaction was swift and furious. People were outraged that a police officer, sworn to protect and serve, would pull a gun on an elderly man simply because he was reminded of his behavior. The incident sparked debates about authority, respect, and the abuse of power, and Alex Grant became the center of public scorn. For Henry Parker, the attention was unwelcome. He had never sought fame or recognition. He preferred the quiet of his retirement, spending his days reading or enjoying walks in the park. Yet now his name was everywhere. Calls flooded in from journalists, old friends, and even strangers asking for his side of the story. But Henry, ever composed, declined all interviews. He had no need to explain himself. His actions spoke for him. He had acted not out of desire for attention, but simply to uphold basic human decency. In contrast, the pressure on the local police department was immense. The video of Alex pulling a gun in a crowded theater became the symbol of everything wrong with law enforcement, and the department was forced to respond. Within hours, Chief Samuel Hayes held a press conference to address the public. "The behavior of Officer Alex Grant is absolutely unacceptable," Chief Hayes said, his voice firm. "We will not tolerate this kind of misconduct. The officer involved has been placed on suspension, and an internal investigation will follow. This department is committed to the highest standards of conduct, and this incident has betrayed those standards." The room of reporters murmured as the chief continued. "To the citizens of this community, I extend my sincerest apologies. And to Major General Henry Parker, we are deeply sorry for what you endured. This is not the behavior you should expect from any member of this force." Alex was quickly removed from duty, his badge and gun confiscated. The internal investigation concluded swiftly, and within days, Alex Grant was fired from the police force. His actions not only endangered the safety of an innocent civilian, but also severely damaged the trust between the police and the community. While Alex's fate was sealed, the incident left a lasting stain on the police department. The department promised to review its training programs and improve accountability measures to prevent such an incident from happening again. The media attention, however, wasn't over. The press reached out to Henry again, asking for comment on Alex's firing, but Henry declined all offers. He didn't want to be a figurehead for the media's drama. Instead, he remained silent, letting the actions of the police chief and the department speak louder than any statement he could offer. Several weeks later, another press conference was held, this time to offer a formal apology to the public. Chief Hayes, now joined by other high-ranking officers, stood before the cameras. "We deeply regret the events that transpired at the Sunset Theater. We apologize to Major General Parker for the distress this caused him, and we apologize to the citizens of this city for the actions of one of our own," Chief Hayes said. The department promised reforms, including a review of its policies on use of force and interaction with the public. They also announced that a civilian oversight committee would be established to ensure greater accountability. Though Henry was invited to attend the press conference, he once again chose not to. Instead, he issued a brief statement through his lawyer, simply stating, "I do not seek recognition for my actions that night. What I hope for is that we all remember the importance of respect and decency, regardless of our positions or titles." The story continued to capture the public's imagination, and in the days that followed, many shared their thoughts on social media. The viral video became a symbol of the need for greater respect and responsibility from those in power. Henry's quiet dignity in the face of provocation had resonated with many, and the incident served as a stark reminder of the importance of maintaining one's composure in difficult situations. As for Henry, life slowly returned to normal. He continued his daily walks, read his books, and enjoyed the simple pleasures of retirement. The theater incident had been a moment of tension, but it had also shown him the power of quiet strength. It was a lesson not only for the young police officer, but for society as a whole. A few weeks after the incident, as Henry sat on a park bench, a man approached him, his face full of respect. "Mr. Parker," the man said, "I just wanted to thank you. What you did that day showed me that we can all do better. I'll try to be more patient and respectful from now on." Henry smiled warmly and placed a hand on the man's shoulder. "We can all learn, my friend. It's never too late to be better," he said, his voice calm but meaningful. And so Henry Parker's life continued, marked by the quiet wisdom of someone who had seen much and learned from it. His message was simple: respect, dignity, and kindness are the values that define us, and it's never too late to choose to act with them in mind.